Welcome back, folks, to another episode of It Takes a Village podcast. My next guest has quite a distinguished record. If you were to read the resume of Claire Meadows, it would span multiple pages. She's currently the head coach of Queen's women's basketball team, amassing I want to say a 63 win record to 17 losses over the last 5 years. She's coached provincially, she's coached nationally, and she even has experience coaching in the Olympics, which we'll tap into later on. So a lot of experience that many other coaches don't get to have in their career. And we'll touch on the podium finishes, bronze, silver, and gold at USPORT across multiple institutions. Claire, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So I want to kind of get into the story of Claire a little bit. You've had so much success over the past decade, but even prior to that. Can you get into maybe some of your view of success, but also the people that kind of helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit interesting when you are, I guess, reading out some of the accolades, and easy to see some of these successes, but without any kind of success, I think there's a lot of failure that comes too that you maybe don't necessarily see. And I think that's an important piece of the recipe. When you're trying to be successful, you are successful, you're trying to strive to be as good as you can be in whatever you're doing. So as much as, I've definitely had some success as of late. Failure has been an equal part of that recipe, and you have to want to welcome that to be as good as you can be. So I always think about that and the importance of it, and not overlooking some of that as well when we're talking about people's stories.
And then who are your mentors, like getting into the coaching world? Like I know you played for Queens from 2002 to 2007. So maybe about 2 decades now coaching. Who kind of helped you or inspired you to get into the coaching world?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different people who have really been by my side and supported me. Going back to when I first thought about getting into coaching and kind of taking the leap in this profession. Dave Wilson, who was the coach of Queens for 40 years prior to me taking over the program, he was the one who kind of kickstarted all of this. When I graduated from Queens, I went to Teachers College and I was getting into teaching in Kingston, and I was still doing some work with the Queens basketball program. And he asked me if I wanted to coach, and encouraged me to go into that profession. Always said right away that it was a very difficult profession, and so made sure I was aware of that. But he was definitely the first person that steered me into the coaching realm, and I'm thankful for that, and somebody kind of giving me a little bit of a nudge early on. I mean, I was in my early to mid 20s when I started this journey. So he's an important piece to my career. I still talk to him every Monday. We have a phone call. He watches our games on the weekend, and he takes notes, and he lets me know, his thoughts, the good and the bad, after every game. So appreciate those conversations still. And then more recently, Lisa Tomitis, who's the coach of University of Saskatchewan. If it truly, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her. She, early on in my coaching career, I went through a difficult stretch, and she was there and, picked up the phone and called me, and she said, "Get yourself to Sask." And so I hopped in my car and I drove to Sask, and I was there for 3 years. We won a USPORT's gold medal there. And then that obviously led me to being able to coach Germany and being in the Olympics. So I truly wouldn't be sitting in this seat right now if it wasn't for her.
I have to ask, about your experience in Germany. Like, how do you get involved? Like, do you have to be German? And like, how do you get involved with the Olympics? Obviously, you have to be good at what you're doing, but that must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, long story short, if you're a player, you obviously have to have citizenship of the country that you're playing for. Coaches don't have to have that. So I'm not German. I don't speak German. I think I can count to 10 now. But that's as far as I got. Lisa Tamidas was asked to coach the German national team. She's our former senior women's national team coach until the Tokyo Olympics. And so Germany was looking for a new coach back in 2023, and they put in a call to Lisa. Lisa accepted that position. I was just her assistant coach at Sask. And so she obviously wanted to bring in her own staff. And so I got a phone call probably around this time in 2023. And I picked up the phone and she asked if I wanted to be her assistant coach for the German national team. So that was probably the most unexpected phone call I've ever received. And, we didn't know how that journey was going to play out. We were going to do it for a 6-week stint at Eurobasket in 2023, and we ended up qualifying. You have to finish top 6 at Eurobasket to earn a berth in the Olympic qualifiers. And with about 0.4 seconds left on the clock in a baseline inbounds, we scored to tie a game that went into overtime that we then won, and that qualified us for the Olympic qualifiers. Fast forward to the Olympic qualifiers, another wild finish to a game. We were playing Brazil, and the winner of that game qualified for the Olympics. We won by 2. And it was a pretty wild finish. So, that phone call, we thought it was going to be 6 weeks. Fun experience with the German team. It turned into 3 years and a trip to the Olympics. So that was just like a truly remarkable run and experience that we had.
That is amazing. And like I said earlier, you've had experiences that other people might not even have in their lifetime, with accomplishing podium finishes in USPORT, but then let alone the Olympics, right? That's pretty remarkable. So congrats to you on that. I want to turn back the clock a little bit. You started out west, and then you've kind of settled your roots now out east there in Kingston. Do you kind of have to go? You kind of mentioned it earlier. Do you kind of have to go where the job is, and what's available? Like, how does the coaching realm work?
Yeah, I mean, there's only 48 jobs in the country, head coaching positions for USPORT women's basketball. And the hope is that when coaches do land a job that they like, they want to stay there for a certain amount of time. And so there's not that many jobs that open up. And so you truly have to be flexible and adaptable in this profession. And when a job does come up, I think especially early on in your career, you have to be willing to move places. And like I said, be flexible to take opportunities when they arise. And truly, that's what I did. I went out and I did my master's at the University of Victoria, coaching master's there. And I spent a year at the University of Alberta doing like a practicum placement for my coaching master's. And I always thought I was going to go back to Queens right away after that. And I ended up meeting another coach at the University of Alberta who was the lead assistant. She took the head coaching position at the University of Lethbridge, convinced me to go there with her. So I was there for 3 years. Then I took the head coaching position at the University of Okanagan, UBC Okanagan in Kelowna. I was there for 3 years. And then that led me to Sask and then Queens. So, if you had to ask me what my journey was going to be at the start of all this, I never in a million years would have thought it would look like that. But you definitely have to be open to going to wherever opportunities present themselves.
So one more question about yourself before we get into some other broad questions and program questions. what's your goal, or what are your long-term goals? Have you accomplished everything that you wanted? Like, you have a U Sport gold, you have a U Sport silver and bronze. What's next on that hit list?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I've probably changed the answer to this question recently, and I think we might get into some of the why behind this in some other, conversations moving forward. Simply, it's just continual growth. If I can continue to become a better coach, if our program can continue to grow on and off the court, I'm satisfied. I try not to place too much attention or focus on an outcome. And that aligns a little bit with more my philosophy around coaching, which I think has changed in the last little bit. But if I can continue to grow the people around me, grow the program that I'm in, that's my ultimate goal at the end of the day.
Thank you for sharing. Get into some of the more general questions here. I've done a couple of these podcasts with some coaches out west here, but I'm kind of curious to hear from you and someone who's very decorated. What separates a good coach from a great one?
The first two things that come to my mind, when you ask that question, it's care and competency. Um, I always say, the players don't know how much the players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Care comes first. Um, and then I think, when you have that care, the foundation of through care comes trust. There is an element, I think, to great coaches in terms of their competency and their knowledge and their ability to teach that knowledge. So those are the two things that come to mind when you ask that. And I think if you were just watching March Madness over the last little bit, you see so many different styles of coaching. Specifically, I think the biggest contrast was noticed in the men's final between Dan Hurley and Dusty May. Like, you have two incredibly different coaches coaching that game. When you do some research on them and you listen to their players speak about them, although they appear to be so different in their style, there's a lot of care that goes into the program and that goes into their players and competency in their ability to then coach those players.
I was watching, and I think this clip went viral. I was watching the Women's March Madness, and there was a coach. I forget the coach and the team.
Yeah, it was Brenda Fries.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and
she's
you can't have that moment without the trust and the care. Like, there's
mhm,
so much that goes into that moment to be able to
mhm.
have it with the player.
Because objectively, people are like, "Oh, like she's ripping her player," but I mean, pointing like she's really close, nose to nose, pointing at her player. But I think somebody did a lip over or lip sync and a lip read, and they were like, "I need you to want the big moment." And then I think she comes back. This girl gets off the court and comes back in a couple minutes later, and she
Yeah,
scores the next basket. Am I correct on that?
100%. Yeah, yeah,
Like such a cool, and like you say, like unless you know the backstory, it could be months, could be years of care and trust in that player. To the objector, it's like that she's not a good coach. But hold on a sec, right? We need to dig a little deeper, and I think part of that is a problem with social media and all that. But
I was just
it
gonna
took
say quick sound bites that can turn into something way more than it is or isn't.
100%. So kind of getting into your like maybe in-game experience leadership style. How would you describe yours?
Yeah, um, and this kind of circles back to the question about what are your long term goals. What do you want to do with coaching? It, I I would consider myself a values based coach, and we spend a lot of time in the Queen's program talking about this, and we really try to surrender to the outcome. Do we want to win an OUA championship and a national championship? 100%. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't have that competitive drive and spirit and want to win. So we very much identify what our goals are at the beginning of the year, and then what it's going to take to achieve those goals. And then we very much surrender them and try not to talk about that outcome. It then becomes process driven and very much values driven. And so we spend a lot of time talking about, first of all, our individual values, and understanding who each person is in our program and why they hold the values that they do. And then we come up with our team values. And those team values that we decide upon then drive how we behave, um, how we approach each and every day in our program, and then how we evaluate, were we successful or not. And so if we say, we want to, our values are belonging, energy, grit, and gratitude. Those were our values this year. So at the end of each practice or at the end of each game, we then say, did we bring the energy that we needed to bring today? Did we approach this day with gratitude? Did we have that element of grit that whatever it was? And if we can say, yes, we did to all of those things, fantastic. Like, we won the day and we're moving in the right direction. If we feel we fell short in one of our values, then we have to spend a little bit more time there. But that really becomes our rubric, or whatever, however you want to call it, for did we live up to our standards? And if we did, then we're moving in the right direction.
Starting from your first year until now, you obviously seen a lot of success, a lot of wins. You've mentioned a couple heartbreaks in games. Has your style changed? Has your perspective changed on coaching over the last 20 years?
Yeah, for sure. And I hope as I continue to move forward, it continues to change and evolve. I think when I was younger and I first got into coaching, I felt like I approached the profession like I had to prove something. And I think, especially when I was getting into the profession, it was more male dominated than it is today. We still have a ways to go, but you start to, at least I did, behave and coach in a way that you think is accepted or expected in the profession. And how I approached coaching didn't align with who I was at the core. And it took me some time to figure that out, who I was and who I wanted to be, and really staying true to myself. And I think over time, one of my core values is authenticity, and truly being true to yourself and who you are. And so, um, I feel like that's the biggest change in how I've approached coaching. I've been as a coach, is just really being true to myself and who I am, and trying not to deviate or waver from that. And I think when I was younger, I was trying to fit myself into a certain mold, and that didn't work for me, and learned some hard lessons through that, but am definitely better for it now.
Mm, You're a two-time OUA Coach of the Year. Most recent was this past season. How do people get nominated for that? Is it all wins and losses, or is it go a little bit deeper than that?
Um, in terms of, like, how other coaches, every coach votes on who they
Okay.
think should be coach of the year, and so it's coach voting. And every coach is nominated, so you can basically go in and just check off who you think should be,
Okay.
coach of the year. I think you vote for top 3 or top 5, or put your top 3 or top 5 in, and there's a point system that aligns with that. So
That's, again, another measurement of success in my eyes, like to the objector, like to be a coach of the year twice in the span of a few years is pretty impressive. Um, let's get into maybe some of the identity of a team who has made a podium. Like you got a USPORT gold with U of S, and then a silver bronze with Queens. What are the comparables across those teams? Like, is there a certain thing that you need to have to make it to the top?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best teams that, I've coached and been a part of and have seen that success. I mean, each team is so different, and I'll I think about the 2 teams at Queens when we went bronze medal, my first year, silver medal my second year. It's the makeup of the team for sure. Specifically with that team, I thought we had incredible leadership on that team, and, give Bridget Mulholland her flowers. I haven't coached a better leader
Mm.
than Bridget, and she was a part of, those 2 years at Queens when we medaled, and, I think you need to have exceptional leadership in your program just to withstand, the pressures of the season and the expectations of a season, and then being able to handle, the adversities that come with a season like that. And when you do it once and then you're trying to, be be as successful again, the pressures mount. And so I think you need great leadership, and in those teams we truly had it. A and I'll add to that, there was a sense of joy that we played with. Um, I think joy is a competitive advantage. Um, and you when people hear somebody say, "Oh, you need joy," and they just think it's fun and they think it's easy, it's not. It still has to be demanding and challenging. But if you can get this, it's like a fine balance between the demands and the challenges, and still being able to find a lot of joy in all of the moments, of a season. I think that's a bit of a secret recipe to, high achieving, successful teams.
Transitioning into the recruiting part of it, it has to be a huge part of what you do, I would imagine. Back when I was experiencing U Sport myself, you'd create some sort of VHS or floppy disk and send it off to the coach and see what hits. What is recruiting like now, and who do you look for? Do you look for those strong leaders?
Yeah, I mean, recruiting now, feels like it's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week
Mm.
job. You just have so much access, through, being able to access players' video online, watching live stream, um, and then obviously being in a gym and trying to be in a gym as much as you can. It consumes a lot of the job for sure. I've been really, really fortunate in my time at Queens. The first assistant coach when I was here, her name was Wumi Agumbiade. Really good recruiter and connected in the community. Michaela Bearza, she goes by Coach Meeks, is our full-time assistant now, and an absolutely brilliant recruiter. She was down in the States for 5 years at Florida and Tulsa before coming back to Canada. Luckily, she's in our program, but, she's a phenomenal recruiter, and so I've been really, really lucky, in terms of the assistants that we've had in this program since I've been here, who have, really done a great job in that space.
Um, Getting into the player, uh, are there things that student athletes are navigating or dealing with that maybe the outsider wouldn't understand?
Yeah, I just think there's so much pressure on the student athlete, um, and I think probably more pressure than there's ever been. I think that
How come?
stems a lot from social media, um, and I feel like we players, coaches, people in any profession, it we chase this perfection or perfectionism that we think exists, because we are constantly comparing what we do to others because of our phone and because of, social media. And so I, I just think that naturally it places different pressures on the athlete in this day and age than I think ever before. I think specifically with female student athletes, it's like the pressure of trying to be this perfect student athlete, being great in the classroom. We have to be fit and be strong, but as females, we don't want to be too muscular. We have to be, confident and willing, but we can't be intimidating. Like, we're always working in this space of um, almost like double standards, but the pressure to be something, but not be too much of something. And again, I think that comes back to the social media piece, and I just think it has changed a lot in terms of the student athlete experience and the pressures that they face.
My world is the educational world, and a little bit of sports still left, but I often say comparison is the thief of all joy. And when kids hear that, or young athletes hear that, like, it takes them a second, like, what do you mean? So you kind of have to walk it through. But I'm a firm believer in that, and I think as you said, like, the phone is a huge issue, because we're constantly comparing ourselves to the perfection of Instagram or TikTok or whatever. It's like, oh, that person looks amazing. But it's just a snapshot, and who knows how many filters are posted on that, right? But getting into the supports now as a coach, like, how do you support a student athlete who's struggling either physically or mentally?
Yeah, I think just you have to make sure that they understand and know all available resources for them within specifically Queens Athletics and Recreation, and then greater Queens community, making sure that they feel supported. For me, I try to invest a lot of time off the court with my student athletes. I meet with them regularly. And through those meetings, you're just trying to build a foundation of trust and support, and hope that, um, when if somebody is struggling with their mental health or their physical health, whatever it may be, they feel comfortable bringing that forward. And then myself, our coaching staff, just being able to direct them to the proper supports. I personally trying to help them the best that I can, but knowing that I'm not a professional. And so making sure that whoever they need to talk to or see, they are able to do that. But I always think the first step in all of that is just building proper relationships and trust with the players, so they do feel comfortable coming forward, and then you can direct them whichever way they need to go to make sure that they are properly supported.
Last question before we get into some rapid fire questions for you. What advice for up and coming young women would you give to play at a high level, whether it's youth sport or provincially or nationally?
I think the biggest thing, and this is some of the growth that I went through, is just figure out what is important to you. Um, and once you understand truly what's important to you, and that's not necessarily like basketball or on the court, it's what is important to you as a person. Figure out what those things are, and lean on them, and make them as much as you can a part of your life. Because sport is hard, coaching is hard, and I think if you don't have the proper supports around you, it becomes that much harder. So you have to figure out what is important to you. And that goes back to, figuring out your values and figuring out what that system looks like for you, and stay true to that as best you can through the highs and the lows, because there's going to be a lot of highs and lows. But when you figure out what's important to you and who you are and your values, I think the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low. And I think that that's a healthy place to be in this profession.
Okay, a couple rapid fire questions for you. What is the most underrated skill in basketball?
Passing.
Just passing, bounce passing, or just passing in general?
Any kind of passing.
Eh,
Yeah, just the ability to pass on time, on target, under pressure, and set your teammate up for them to have success. I think it's the most underrated skill.
My daughter, just a sidebar here, my daughter's 6 and she just started basketball. And the coaches are trying to introduce a push pass. You know, I've kind of always thought it was a chest pass, but I guess there's a thing called the push pass. And I coached basketball for years, but I never really knew what it was called. But just the way she's describing it and then watching all these 6-year-olds try to push pass is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
I
But
love that.
I digress. Do you have a pre-game routine?
I do. It's a little bit dependent if we have a recruit in town or not. If we have a recruit, then my day changes a little bit in terms of, just being busy with the recruit. But if I don't have a recruit and I have a normal day before a game, definitely get out and walk my dogs. And then I watch an episode of Hot Ones.
Of what? Hot ones?
Yeah.
I
Have you
don't know.
heard
I'm
of
not
that?
familiar.
Oh, geez. Okay. You need to look it up.
Okay.
It's good. It's good. You would,
Well,
you would appreciate it.
okay, I'll do that at work today. Um, okay, coach that you are inspired by or follow.
Geez, I'm not great on social media. So I don't follow a ton of people, but I would say somebody who I follow who's great is Coach Jackie. I don't think she's an actual coach, but she has some great coverage on women's sports.
Okay, and where would somebody find her? Social media?
I think her handle is Coach Jackie.
Okay,
Yeah, it's good stuff.
now I'm curious. I'll look at that too. Best coaching advice you've ever received?
Okay, this is funny and you won't believe me, but comparison is the thief of all joy.
No.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Okay, I love that. And who told you that one? Not other than me.
That would have been Dave. Just in some of our conversations, he always says that to me, like, just you have to do your thing, and you can't. The second you start looking at anything else, what they're doing, what they have, it takes away from your energy from what you're doing and trying to do. So I love that one. Yeah.
I love it too. Obviously, that's crazy. Um, okay, we'll start with the bad and we'll get to the good. Your worst basketball moment.
You know what? When I saw this question, it was the first thing I thought about was the end of our year this year. But I think specifically, it's just when your season gets cut short. Um, and it's not necessarily about the loss, but it's about you just feel like you were robbed of time and being able to spend the time that you wanted to continue to spend with your team and your players, and you just feel like you were robbed of, moments and time with a great group of people.
Okay, flip side is your favorite or best basketball moment.
Yeah, two moments popped up immediately, and it was hosting nationals at Queens and winning the bronze medal, and that was the first time Queens women's basketball won a medal in its 100 plus year existence. So that was a really cool moment, and to do it on home court. And then the other moment that popped into my head was qualifying for the Olympics. That was a pretty
Hmm.
surreal moment and experience.
Okay, final word for Claire Meadows. What do you want our listeners to take away from all this today?
Um, I think it goes back to the conversation about values, and I think that that's the most important thing that I've learned in this profession and as a coach is just, like I said, um, figure out what is important to you, figure out who you are and who you want to be and the values that surround that, and just lean on them. and lean on your people, because at the end of the day, it's not about anything more than the people and the experiences that you have with them.
Well, I've been following you for the better part of a couple decades now, and I hope to continue to do so. I wish you nothing but success, and I hope maybe one day you can be a Olympic gold medalist down the road and win another U Sport gold as well at Queens. But I wish you nothing but the best. I so appreciate your time. I know, as you mentioned, it's valuable and it's limited. So to do this little podcast, it's much appreciated.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. It's great to see you just giving back to sport and people in sport. I think this is fantastic. So thank you.
Let's connect again in a little bit and see where you're at.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.